kayaking down a river on a nice summer's day might sound like a relaxing activity to you and me, but relaxing isn't everyone's idea of fun. Was anyone else hiding behind a pillow while watching that? You may not fancy yourself as an extreme kayaker, but I'm about to take you on a rip-roaring ride through all things weird, wonderful, and downright amazing in this episode of Things You Will See for the First Time in Your Life. The ocean is home to some creatures that are so wacky you'd hardly believe your eyes if you saw them. And speaking of eyes, take a look at this super strange googly-eyed squid.
They look like googly eyes.
They look like they painted them on.
No, this isn't a stuffed toy someone dropped into the ocean. This is a living, breathing squid that was spotted off the coast of California in August 2016 at a depth of 2,950 feet. When the team of researchers aboard the EV Nautilus research vessel first caught sight of the creature, they couldn't stop laughing at how fake it looked. This bright purple blob is actually known as the stubby squid, or Rossia pacifica, which is actually more closely related to the cuttlefish family, despite looking like a straight-up cross between a squid and an octopus. This hilariously bizarre marine creature spends its life on the sea floor, activating a sticky mucus jacket, which allows it to gather pebbles and sand on its body as it burrows into the sediment to camouflage itself. That is, except for its giant eyes, which it leaves poking out to spot any potential prey like shrimp and small fish. As for that wide-eyed deer-in-the-headlights expression, researcher Samantha Wishnack, who was aboard the vessel at the time, says that the team probably encountered the squid at a time when it wasn't expecting to see a 5,500-pound underwater robot moving towards it. Is there ever a convenient time for that kind of encounter? Anyone else feel like this googly-eyed octopus is staring right into their soul? It's almost like it's hypnotizing you, saying, "You should be subscribed to be amazed and like this video, and use your tentacles to tickle that bell icon." What can I say? I guess you better listen to them. All done? Then let's crack on. Are you the kind of person who craves the oh-so-addictive feeling of adrenaline pumping through your veins at all times? Well, there are plenty of hidden gems in the world that can certainly help to scratch that itch, and this has got to be one of the most hair-raising spots you'll ever lay your eyes on. Was anyone else's heart in their mouth while watching that, or just me? This nail-bitingly narrow, winding river is the Rio Claro, which lies outside of Molina, Chile. And it's about as epic as it gets. As you can see, some parts of the river taper down to become such a tight squeeze that the only way to appreciate it in its full glory is to grab a kayak and take the plunge. But who would be brave enough, or crazy enough, to do such a thing? Professional kayaker DANE Jackson and his buddies, that's who. DANE has taken his GoPro on all sorts of rip-roaring adventures, but his trip down the Rio Claro in July 2020 has got to be the craziest by far. Of course, it takes a real expert to navigate their way through the unexpected sharp bends and jutting rocks, not to mention the endless drops. Okay, that does look pretty fun, but this beautiful stretch of river certainly isn't for the faint-hearted, not to mention the inexperienced when it comes to extreme kayaking. For now, I think it's best that most of us live vicariously through seasoned thrill-seekers like DANE Jackson, don't you? We think of most birds as being dainty, beautiful, and not at all threatening to us humans, right? Well, allow me to introduce you to one particularly fearsome bird that breaks the mold, the western capercaillie. The chances are you've never even heard of the capercaillie, unless you happen to live in the Scottish Highlands, where they're mostly found nowadays. Capercaillies actually went extinct in Britain in the 18th century, before a reintroduction project began in Scotland in the 1830s, and there are presently only around 1,000 left in the wild. They're a member of the grouse family, and if you couldn't already tell just by looking at it, they can get pretty darn big. In fact, the largest specimen ever recorded in captivity weighed in at a whopping 16 pounds. For some perspective, that's heavier than a bowling ball. In a case of extreme sexual dimorphism, which basically means males and females display distinctly different traits, male capercaillies are the larger of the two species and are about twice the size of their female counterparts. Besides its sheer size and imposing appearance, the male capercaillie is also famed for its, interesting vocalizations. If you were to hear it before you laid eyes on it, you'd probably think this creature was some sort of squealing pig rather than a bird. Or even a can of spray paint being sprayed. Males can create quite a stir with their loud mating calls and are known to exhibit fearless and aggressive behavior towards humans during courting season. Thanks to their ferocious reputation, cyclists and hikers know to keep their distance, unless they're prepared to face the consequences. Now, that's one bird I wouldn't want to mess with. Allow me to interrupt regular proceedings for a moment with one burning question. Have any of you guys come across something weird, wonderful, or downright amazing that needs to be shared with the world? If the answer is yes, just get in touch at clips@bmas.com with any awesome clips or images you found. And if it gets featured in a future episode, you might earn yourself a shout-out. Now, let's get back to it. Remember when fidget spinners were all the rage? Those were the days. The craze is pretty much over now, but back in 2017, Earth's former favorite fad was put to the test like never before in outer space. That's right, crew members aboard NASA's International Space Station decided it would be fun to see how the contraption would spin in microgravity, and boy did it spin. Astronaut Randy Bresnik and his colleagues performed a series of tricks with a NASA-branded toy, including one crew member doing dizzying somersaults while the fidget spinner rotates in his hand. But by far the coolest thing about this out-of-this-world display is seeing the spinner floating through the air while continuing to spin. Interestingly, microgravity does actually make the gadget act slightly differently than how it would on Earth. As you probably know, the typical fidget spinner works by holding onto the center part of the spinner as you give it a whirl. The satisfyingly smooth rotation you see happens because of the tiny ball bearings encased in the rings, called races. The smoother the action in that central bearing race, the less friction there is, meaning the toy can spin for longer. But in space, the center part doesn't stay still. As explained by NASA, allowing the fidget spinner to float reduces the bearing friction, and means that the rate of the central ring and the other spinner equalize, so that the whole thing spins as a unit. If you watch carefully, you can see this happening when Bresnik lets go of his spinner. At first, the NASA logo stands still, like it would on Earth, but quickly starts rotating along with the rest of the contraption. Gee, watching it spin in microgravity is almost enough to make the fidget spinner cool again. It's hard to imagine what the landscape of an alien planet would look like. But what if I told you we could get a pretty good idea from some very real places here on Earth? Believe it or not, this is not a work of digital manipulation. This incredible footage was captured by Miloš Kičević, who has traveled the world documenting some of the most beautiful sights our planet has to offer. Far from being inhabited by Martians, what you're actually seeing here is the incredible landscape known as Deadvlei, which is located inside the Namib-Naukluft National Park in the Namib Desert. Its name literally means dead marsh in English, and it's easy to see why. Deadvlei consists of white clay pan, surrounded by what some say are the highest sand dunes in the world at a staggering average height of 1,150 feet. But the most mind-boggling part is how the solitary trees stand out so strongly against the colorful backdrop of blue sky and rich red dunes, like an oil painting come to life. Deadvlei was formed after a heavy rainfall when the Saugap River flooded, creating temporary shallow pools where the abundance of water allowed camel thorn trees to grow. But when the climate changed some 900 years ago, drought hit the area and sand dunes encroached on the clay pan, permanently blocking the river from the area. With no water to survive, the trees died. But then something strange happened. After being scorched so intensely by the sun for so long, the wood became so dry that it could no longer decompose. The result is a graveyard of skeletonized trees, cursed by the sun to stand in place forevermore. Yellowstone National Park is a 3,500 square mile haven for hundreds of species of protected wildlife, including bears, wolves, and antelope. But perhaps Yellowstone's most iconic animal is the bison. In fact, in 2020, it was estimated that there were a staggering 4,800 bison living there, making it the oldest and largest public bison herd in the United States. They can often be seen grazing, but in 2018, a handful of visitors passing through Lamar Valley Bridge got a little more than they bargained for when this happened. Out of nowhere, a stampede of bison comes storming down the road, running directly past Kristen Clayton, who was filming from the safety of her vehicle. It may seem like a pretty frightening sight, but it's funny to see how respectful these mighty beasts are of the cars in the road as they carefully move around them. They may look imposing, but they're probably just trying to go about their own business. I can almost hear them saying, "Coming through, nothing to see here, people." This guy even has his tongue poking out like an oversized puppy. But unlike puppies, bison are capable of causing some serious damage if you get on the wrong side of them. According to the National Park Service, bison actually cause more injuries than any other animal in Yellowstone. That statement becomes slightly less shocking when you learn that bison are the largest land-dwelling mammals in North America, with bulls tipping the scales at a monumental 2,000 pounds and cows, that's female bison, weighing about half of that. Not to mention the fact that bison are surprisingly agile and can reach speeds of up to 30 miles per hour. So, if you ever end up in a situation as truly bizarre as this one, it's probably best to lead by Clayton's example. Take out your smartphone and don't make any sudden movements. Everyone knows that stone is a solid material that's hard to the touch. So how do you explain these bizarre images? Photoshop? Witchcraft? Nope. These are some of the many hundred ancestral petroglyphs that can be found dotting the sandstone cliffs at the mysterious White Mountain Petroglyph site in Wyoming's Red Desert. They may look totally trippy in these photos, but here's the catch. The hands you see here seemingly pressing into the stone like it's Play-Doh are not the same hands that created the prints themselves. In fact, those hands likely haven't existed for anywhere between 200 and 1,000 years, when the petroglyphs were made by ancient ancestors. Simply put, a petroglyph is any image created by removing part of a rock's surface by incising, picking, or abrading. The many petroglyphs found at White Mountain were likely carved into the sandstone by Shoshone Native Americans. Some appear to show buffalo or elk hunts, while others are hands or footprints scooped into the stone. Melting stone requires the amount of immense heat that is usually only found in the center of the earth. So how did they do it? One theory, supported by geologist Percy Fawcett and the former governor of Connecticut, Hiram Bingham, who rediscovered Machu Picchu, suggests that ancient civilizations may have been able to use an unknown substance derived from plant matter to soften the sandstone. Others even speculate that ancient man possessed an advanced device which somehow allowed the use of extreme high temperatures to shape the solid surfaces. The White Mountain petroglyphs are yet to be studied in detail, so we may never know the answer for certain. But it's safe to say the process probably wasn't as easy as it looks. What do you guys make of this discovery? Let me know in the comments below. The humble hamster is one of the world's most popular and easygoing pets. But these little fur balls are actually capable of far more than just running circles in a wheel. Okay, I bet you're all wondering, how did an adorable pet hamster end up in such a treacherous situation? Allow me to clear things up. This so-called ninja hamster is actually navigating one of the many elaborate mazes dreamed up by his owner, Mr. Adrenaline, who goes by the name DIY Hamster Maze on YouTube. Once he's safely lowered into the maze, this fearless little dude tackles a nail-biting assault course carefully constructed entirely from cardboard, which is complete with all sorts of cool innovations. As he makes his way through tunnels and rope bridges, he comes face to face with a whole host of challenges, including spinning platforms, swinging hammers, and ball pits. Plus, there's even a tense final boss-style battle with a robotic cardboard snake. Things might get a little hairy along the way, but he somehow manages to wriggle his way out of every tricky situation. Just look how he managed to escape falling through this trapdoor. Who knew that watching a hamster complete a maze could be such truly nail-biting stuff? Before you know it, you'll be shouting at your screen, "Go on, little buddy, you can do it!" After valiantly fighting his way through the maze and falling gracefully on a couple of occasions, this little hero arrives safely at the finish line. He must be absolutely tuckered out. It might seem like some of these obstacles could cause him harm, but his owner has reassured viewers that this beloved pet is totally safe. In fact, those little squeals you hear have simply been edited in afterwards. There's nothing quite as comforting as the feeling of petting a cute kitty or pup. Plus, they seem to enjoy it more than we do. But cats and dogs aren't the only animals that love a good old pet. Your first thought after seeing this clip might be, "Aw, that's adorable." But what is that creature? Allow me to introduce you to Charlie the 10-year-old prehensile-tailed porcupine. Jeez, that's quite the mouthful. This species of porcupine live in the South American forests, where they can actually be found living in the trees. They're what's known as an arboreal animal, which means they are excellent climbers, and their long prehensile tail is perfectly developed to help them with grasping. They also have short, thick quills and usually weigh between 4 to 11 pounds, making them smaller than some of their relatives, like the North American porcupine, which can clock in at around 20 pounds. Charlie is just one of the many animals looked after by zookeeper Johnny, who loves educating people about this unusual creature. When Charlie goes on show at the zoo, people often ask if he's just an overgrown hedgehog. During his downtime, Charlie loves to use his curved hands to eat tasty snacks like sweet potatoes or corn on the cob. And as you can see, he also loves to be pet. It might not seem like petting a porcupine is the wisest thing to do, but Johnny follows the natural direction of Charlie's quills to make sure she doesn't hurt herself. Quills are actually just modified hair made of keratin, and it's a myth that porcupines can shoot them out of their body at will. Instead, porcupines raise their quills, like a cat raising its hair, which can snag on a predator and easily detach. You might have fallen in love with Charlie, but I still wouldn't recommend approaching a porcupine to pet it in the wild. You've been warned. Cacti can live for hundreds of years with barely any water, which also makes them a pretty safe bet for amateur houseplant owners. And while their prickly spines may not make them the prettiest plants around, you'll be surprised to learn that many cacti have a secret feminine side. Some species, like those from the Echinopsis genus featured in this stunning time-lapse by Echinopsis Freak, bloom at night and would be pollinated by creatures like moths and bats in the wild. You might be thinking to yourself, hey, I've got a couple of cacti in my bedroom and they've never bloomed with pretty pink flowers. Echinopsis cactus flowers actually bloom overnight and then last for a single day only. In fact, they're usually at their most beautiful for a fleeting couple of hours. Most of the time lapses in this beautiful clip were recorded over the course of approximately 8 hours of change as the flowers open and bloom. You can encourage your cacti to bloom simply by taking special care of them. That means making sure they're kept in a bright location with adequate sunlight and remembering to water them regularly enough so that it doesn't dry out completely. It takes a lot of energy for plants to produce flowers, so feeding them extra nutrients like special fertilizer will also help to encourage blooms. If you're a self-confessed lazy plant owner, your hardy cacti will likely still survive if you don't take these extra precautions, but you might not see it bloom. Thankfully, Echinopsis Freak is here to document all those beautiful blooms for you. Ever taken something out of the freezer to find it frozen solid and covered in icicles? It's not just forgotten quarts of ice cream that suffer those frosty fates. Just take a look at this Lockheed F-117 Nighthawk stealth fighter jet frozen in ice. I know what you're thinking. There isn't a freezer big enough to hold a fighter jet. Well, behold the McKinley Climactic Weather Testing Laboratory. Try saying that 5 times fast. McKinley Climactic Weather Testing Laboratory. McKinley Climactic Weather... It may not have crossed your mind, but testing military aircraft to see how they withstand extreme weather in real ecosystems would be very expensive and unpredictable. To get around that problem, back in 1940, the US Air Force built an engineering marvel, a weather laboratory capable of simulating various climates. The McKinley Climactic Laboratory is an insulated refrigerated hangar that has been operating since 1947, when the US Army Air Corps began assessing warbirds there. A few years later, it opened its doors to the rest of the military, and in the 1980s became accessible to private companies. The primary purpose of the lab is to measure the performance of aircraft parts and other military items at extreme temperatures. While inside the lab, the aircraft is supported and tied down, so the wheels don't move, but the engines are kept running. There are 5 testing chambers, with the world's largest measuring in at a whopping 55,000 square feet. Temperatures in the main chamber can range from a frigid Arctic temperature of -65 degrees Fahrenheit to a scorching 165 degrees Fahrenheit. Liquid refrigerant is stored in a low-pressure surge tank, and compressed vapor is used to create the kinds of frozen conditions the aircraft would encounter in the real world. Among the other chambers is a salt fog chamber capable of replicating tropical conditions, a chamber that blasts vehicles with sun, wind, rain, and dust for ambient conditions, and an altitude chamber that can create pressure altitude as high as 80,000 feet with a temperature range of 80 to 100 degrees Fahrenheit. In its nearly 75-year history, the lab has tested just about every warplane in the US arsenal, and it's not cheap to run. Just one day of testing in the chamber costs between $10,000 to $25,000, while the monthly electric bill is reportedly over $200,000. There's nothing quite like a day at the beach to clear your mind. The waves rolling in off the shore, the sand between your toes, and a herd of elk frantically running through the surf. Wait, what?
Oh my gosh.
This truly bizarre occurrence took place on Cannon Beach in Oregon in January 2021. Eric Bruff, a Seattle resident, was spending the night at a hotel by the sea one Sunday when he suddenly spotted the crowd of nimble-footed creatures running in his direction. Of course, his first instinct was to take out his smartphone and capture it on camera. As they make their way across the surf, the dazed herd can be seen trying to steer clear of the encroaching waves coming from several directions before continuing onward. According to the owner of the hotel, these tides are the highest Cannon Beach has seen since 1967, with some residents claiming to have seen 20-foot waves. It seems like the elk were frantically trying to escape an especially high tide, nicknamed the King Tide, which had driven them up the beach in search for safety in dry land. I know everyone is shocked to see the animals in such an unexpected place, but there's every chance the elk are also thinking, why are those humans staring at us? And more importantly, why did they build their stupid houses on our main trail? Which of these things made your jaw drop the most? If you're craving some more brain food already, why not check out the previous episode of this series next? Don't forget to get in touch at clips@beamazed.com, and as always, thanks for watching, guys.